Ever feel like uh, some spiritual practices are
Yeah.
like shrouded in a bit too much incense and mystery?
Mystery.
Like maybe there's
Yeah.
more to the story than what's being presented?
Right.
That's the feeling I got when I first encountered
Uh-huh.
this intriguing series
Okay.
called Debunking Eastern Spirituality and Religions.
Hmm.
It's
It's a big one.
it is. It's 11 books.
11 books. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Each taking aim at popular Eastern traditions
I see.
and practices,
Okay.
from yoga and meditation
Yeah.
to the beliefs of Hinduism and Buddhism.
And from a particular perspective, it sounds like.
And here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
These authors aren't just offering alternative spiritual paths.
Right.
They're coming at it from a Christian perspective,
I see.
comparing and contrasting these Eastern traditions with their own belief system.
That's going to be interesting.
Yeah,
It's a bold approach.
it is.
One that's bound to spark some lively debate, I would say.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So let's dive right in
Okay.
to a few examples.
Okay.
Um, the first book that caught my eye
Okay.
was Debunking the Bhagavad Gita, a Christian response.
The Bhagavad Gita.
Now, the Bhagavad Gita
Yeah.
is a cornerstone of Hinduism,
Yes.
revered by millions.
Right.
And this book takes a systematic approach,
Okay.
dissecting specific teachings
Uh-huh.
and their implications.
Okay.
For example, it challenges the concept of karma and reincarnation,
Right.
contrasting it with the Christian view of sin and salvation.
I see. Very interesting.
What I found fascinating is how the authors don't shy away
Yeah.
from pointing out what they see as
Yeah.
logical inconsistencies
Interesting.
within the Gita's teachings.
I see.
They even go so far as to analyze the moral dilemmas presented within the text,
Okay.
questioning whether the Gita's message ultimately aligns with ethical behavior.
Right.
It definitely makes you think twice
Yeah.
about accepting any spiritual text at face value, doesn't it?
Yeah. You really have to scrutinize it
Yeah.
and approach it with a discerning eye, for sure.
Speaking of challenging assumptions,
Yeah.
another book that jumped out at me was Debunking Hindu Pseudoscience. This one's particularly relevant today,
Right.
given the growing interest in practices like Ayurveda and yoga,
Yeah.
which are often presented as having,
As scientific.
scientific backing.
Right.
So this book really puts those claims under the microscope,
Okay.
specifically examining practices like Ayurvedic yoga and Vedic astrology.
I see.
For instance,
Yeah.
it critiques the Ayurvedic concept of the three doshas,
Uh-huh.
Vata, Pitta, and Kapha,
Okay.
and how they supposedly determine an individual's health and personality.
Yeah.
The authors argue that there's no scientific evidence to support this system.
Interesting.
It's a stark reminder that ancient wisdom
Right.
doesn't always align with modern scientific understanding.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. But you have to be
Yeah.
careful and look into these things carefully.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's precisely the point that the authors are trying to make.
I see.
They urge readers to be discerning,
Right.
to not blindly accept traditional practices simply because they're ancient
Yeah.
or shrouded in spiritual authority.
I see.
So, okay,
Makes sense.
we've got these deep dives into Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
What about Buddhism?
Buddhism.
There's an
front part.
entire book dedicated to debunking Zen Buddhism, a Christian response, right?
There is.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating how they highlight
Yeah.
the fundamental differences
Uh-huh.
between these two seemingly peaceful traditions.
Okay.
Like what, for example?
Well, like, for example, the concept of the self.
Okay.
Zen Buddhism emphasizes the idea of no self,
Uh-huh.
the impermanence of the individual ego,
Yeah.
while Christianity centers on the belief in an eternal soul.
Yeah, completely different.
Pretty fundamental difference in a worldview.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole question of suffering.
Right.
Zen Buddhism views suffering as
Yeah.
an inherent part of existence,
Okay.
something to be accepted and transcended.
Yeah.
Whereas Christianity sees suffering as a consequence of sin,
Uh-huh.
something to be overcome through redemption.
I see.
The authors delve into how these contrasting views shape each tradition's approach
Approved.
to life's challenges.
Yeah, that's really interesting because they both have very different
Yeah.
approaches to suffering.
Completely.
It's interesting how they contrast.
So we've got Hinduism and Buddhism
Uh-huh.
in the crosshairs.
Yeah.
Are there any other major Eastern traditions tackled in this series?
There are definitely. There's a particularly hard-hitting book
Okay.
titled Hindutva, The Ideology of Hate,
Wow.
which examines the rise of Hindu nationalism.
Now that's a topic with serious real-world implications.
It is, yeah. And it's a growing movement that needs to be addressed, I think.
For sure.
And the book does a good job of really unpacking it.
Yeah, so the book dives into the historical context of Hindutva,
Okay.
examining how it's evolved,
Yeah.
from a cultural movement
Uh-huh.
to a potent political force.
Yes.
And the authors don't hold back in critiquing
Uh-huh.
what they see as the exclusionary
Okay.
and potentially dangerous aspects of this ideology.
Yeah, it can be.
It's a sobering reminder that spiritual beliefs can have a profound impact on society.
Yes, they can.
And not always for the better.
That's right.
This is all very thought-provoking.
It is.
But you have to wonder,
Yeah.
do the authors offer any alternative paths
Right.
for those seeking spiritual growth or enlightenment?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the series primarily focuses on deconstructing these Eastern traditions from a Christian viewpoint,
Right.
but it does implicitly raise an important question,
Which is?
which is if you're drawn to Eastern spirituality,
Yeah.
but find its core tenets incompatible with your own worldview,
Uh-huh.
where do you turn?
That's a question for each listener to grapple with.
Yeah.
And it seems like this series is designed to spark precisely that kind of introspection.
That's right, making people think for themselves.
Yeah.
And examine their own beliefs.
Yeah, and figure out
Where they stand on things.
where they stand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, this is really interesting.
It is, yeah. I'm really enjoying this deep dive.
Me too.
Yeah, it really challenges you to think about what truly resonates with your own values and beliefs.
Yeah, and it's not just about critiquing like entire religions or philosophies.
Right.
This series also takes aim at specific practices that have gained mainstream popularity.
Uh-huh.
One that comes to mind is Transcendental Meditation, or TM.
Okay, TM.
There's a whole book dedicated to debunking Transcendental Meditation. TM.
Okay, interesting.
TM has a huge following these days.
It does.
Celebrities swear by it, CEOs practice it, and there are meditation studios popping up everywhere.
Right, it's very popular.
But what's the Christian perspective on it?
Right.
The book delves into the potential conflicts
Okay.
between TM's core principles and Christian teachings.
Uh-huh.
For instance, TM emphasizes achieving a state of pure consciousness
Okay.
through mantra repetition.
I see.
And that sounds harmless enough, right?
Yeah.
Just sitting quietly repeating a word or sound.
Yeah, on the surface it seems pretty innocuous.
Right.
Right.
But the authors argue that this focus on emptying the mind
Yeah,
and detaching from the world contrasts with,
the Christian
the Christian emphasis
emphasis on being in the world.
on actively engaging with God through prayer and service.
Right. Yeah, interesting.
So it's not just about whether TM is effective for stress reduction or not.
Right.
It's about the underlying spiritual implications that might not align with a Christian worldview.
That's right. You have to look at what's
Yeah.
behind these things sometimes.
sure.
The motivations and
Yeah,
the origins.
the origins, exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads us to another fascinating book,
Okay.
Debunking the New Age Movement, A Christian Response.
Okay, the New Age movement.
Now, the New Age movement is a bit of a slippery fish.
It is
Um,
hard to define sometimes.
It encompasses so many different beliefs and practices.
Right, it's very eclectic.
How do the authors even begin to tackle that?
Right.
They start by tracing the movement's origins,
Okay.
exploring its root in Eastern mysticism, esotericism, and even psychology.
Wow, so they really go back to the historical roots.
They do. They really do their research.
Interesting.
And then they examine popular New Age beliefs like the law of attraction, channeling, and crystal healing.
Okay, some of the big ones.
Yeah.
The popular ones.
And I'm guessing they see some red flags there.
Probably,
The authors argue that these practices can lead to a reliance on self-centered spirituality,
I see.
seeking personal power and fulfillment rather than aligning with God's will.
Okay, so again, that emphasis on the self.
Right.
As opposed to a more
Yeah,
God-centered perspective.
exactly.
Okay.
It's interesting because a lot of New Age practices like mindfulness and energy healing
Yeah.
have become so integrated into mainstream wellness culture.
They have, it's true.
It's almost like people don't even see them as spiritual anymore.
That's right, and it's important to
Yeah.
point that out, I think.
For sure.
Yeah,
That's precisely why this book is so important.
I see.
It encourages readers to be aware of the underlying beliefs that shape these practices,
Right.
even if they're presented in a secularized form.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, okay,
So far,
this series seems to be casting a wide net,
it is.
covering everything from major religions and philosophies
Yeah,
to specific meditation techniques and even popular trends.
right, like we were saying.
But is it all just criticism?
Good question. Does it offer
Yeah.
any practical guidance?
Yeah. Do they offer any practical guidance?
Well, the series primarily focuses on deconstructing Eastern spirituality from a Christian viewpoint,
Right.
but it implicitly points readers
Okay.
towards a deeper engagement with their own faith.
Okay, so it's not just about tearing down other beliefs.
Right.
but also about building up a stronger foundation for your own.
Exactly.
And one way the author do this
Okay.
is by directly engaging the reader with thought-provoking questions throughout the series.
Oh, I like that. It's
Yep.
interactive.
Yeah, it's not just a one-way lecture.
Right.
It's actually inviting the reader to participate in the discussion.
I see.
For example, they might ask, have you ever felt drawn to Eastern spiritual practices?
Yeah.
Or what aspects of these traditions do you find appealing?
That's really smart.
It encourages self-reflection,
Uh-huh.
helping readers connect the concepts to their own personal experiences.
Yeah, make it more relevant.
And they don't shy away from tough questions.
Like what?
Like, does it matter if spiritual practices are backed by scientific evidence?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Or what are the potential risks of incorporating beliefs that might contradict your core values?
Right. You really have to think about that carefully.
Yeah,
That's a great question.
those are some serious questions to ponder.
They are, yeah.
It sounds like this series really pushes readers
To think for themselves.
to examine not only what they believe,
Right.
but why they believe it.
Yeah, why do you believe that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where its true value lies.
I think so.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's not about providing easy answers or dictating a specific set of beliefs.
Right.
It's about prompting critical thinking
Yeah.
and encouraging readers to embark on a journey of self-discovery,
Yes.
guided by their own values and worldview,
Exactly. Using their own discernment and
their own compass.
their own compass. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
It's almost like the series itself is a form of spiritual practice.
Yeah.
It's challenging you to question, to analyze,
Right.
and ultimately to arrive at a deeper understanding of yourself and your place in the world.
I like that. Yeah, it's a practice in itself. It's a spiritual practice of discernment.
Exactly.
Like, that's cool.
Yeah, and that process,
Yeah.
that journey of exploration and discernment,
Right.
is ultimately what true spiritual growth is all about.
It is. I think so.
Yeah. Pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it's like you authors are handing you a flashlight saying, okay, now go explore
Yeah.
those shadowy corners of your own beliefs.
And that can be kind of scary for
Yeah.
some people.
Yeah.
But I think if you're really serious about
Yeah.
spiritual growth,
Yeah.
you need to,
You have to look at everything.
yeah, you got to be willing to
Yeah.
question everything.
For sure.
Yeah.
And this series isn't for the faint of heart.
No, it's definitely,
But it's definitely for the intellectually curious.
yeah, you got to be willing to
Yeah.
think critically about these things.
For anyone who's ever questioned the easy answers
Right.
or felt like there's more to spirituality
Yeah.
than what's often presented,
That's right.
it makes you realize how important it is to be an informed seeker.
It really does.
Yeah.
You can't just take things at
No.
face value.
To really understand the roots of what you're embracing,
Yeah.
whether it's a meditation practice,
Right.
a spiritual philosophy, or even a trendy wellness routine.
That's right.
Especially in a world where spiritual ideas are constantly being repackaged and marketed,
They are, yeah, and often taken out of context.
often without their full context
Yeah.
and implications.
Yeah.
So for our listener out there
Yeah.
who's intrigued by this series,
Mhm.
who's maybe wrestling with some of these same questions,
Mm.
what would you say is the key takeaway?
The key takeaway.
Yeah, what's the one thing
Oh, that's a good question.
you hope they'll walk away with?
You know, I would say that the one thing I would want them to walk away with is that
Yeah.
it's really important to engage in critical thinking about your own
Your beliefs.
spiritual journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, whether you agree with the author's perspective or not,
Right.
the series pushes you to examine your assumptions, consider alternative viewpoints,
Right.
and ultimately arrive at a more informed understanding of both Eastern spirituality and your own worldview.
Yeah.
It's not about blindly accepting or rejecting anything.
No.
It's about actively participating in the process
Right.
of inquiry and discernment.
And that process could be applied to so many areas of life,
Yeah,
not just spirituality.
yeah, that's right.
It's about cultivating an inquisitive spirit,
Yeah,
that willingness to delve deeper
yes.
and challenge our own preconceived notions.
Be open-minded.
Exactly.
And willing to
yeah.
consider different perspectives.
And ultimately, that's what leads to personal growth, right?
It is.
That continuous process of questioning, exploring,
Yes.
and refining our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. And on that note,
Yeah,
I think we've reached the end of our deep dive
I think so.
into debunking Eastern spirituality and religions.
Yes,
It's been a fascinating exploration
it has.
into the intersection of faith,
Yeah,
reason, and the human search for meaning.
I agree.
A true testament to the power of critical thinking and open dialogue.
Yes. Well
To our
said.
listener.
Yes.
If this series has piqued your interest,
Uh-huh.
I encourage you to check it out.
Yeah.
Dive into these books, do your own research, and most importantly,
Yes.
keep asking those tough questions.
Keep learning.
Because The journey of self-discovery
is on.
is an ongoing one.
Yes.
And there's always more to learn,
Yes.
more to question, and more to explore.
Absolutely.